Good evening. Welcome to Aldersgate United Methodist Church. We're so glad that you're with us tonight. I'd like to welcome everybody who's in the sanctuary and also those who are watching us online. Thank you so much for attending. I'm Carrie Beckenhauer. I'm a member of the Earth Stewards here at Aldersgate. This is our first presentation of our series that we sponsor typically every winter. And a couple of housekeeping things before we start. One is that the restrooms are out the double doors you just came in to your left and down the hall. You'll see the water fountain. When you get to the water fountain, you'll know you're in the right spot. One other thing is that you'll notice that we have emergency exits on every wall in the sanctuary. Unlikely that we'll need to use one, but just in case, always good to know where to go. Our speaker tonight will probably talk for 30 to 40 minutes. After that, we'll have question and answer time. We'll bring around a wireless mic if you have a question so that people who are at home can hear the question, and then Jessica can respond. So Jessica Kniffel is from the LAS Energy Services Group. She's going to talk with us tonight about the Sustainability Energy Program and also the program LAS and the city have about heat pump. They have a heat pump incentive program. You might be saying, well, this SEP program, Sustainability Energy Program, how long has that been around? Here's some stats that just came out today. Since the program's founding in 2009, LES has awarded $34 million to over 28,000 energy efficiency projects. These projects have reduced net peak demand by 36 megawatts, which is the equivalent of annual peak of 47 big box stores. We don't even have 47 big box stores in Lincoln. They have also reduced net annual energy consumption by 147,000 megawatt hours, the equivalent annual energy consumption of more than 15,000 homes, and reduced CO2 emissions by over 100,000 tons. So CO2 emissions is the bad stuff that goes into the atmosphere. The equivalent annual emissions of more than 40,000 cars. So this year, they have $2.2 million available for customers to claim for qualified projects. And that's what Jessica's going to talk with us about. So please join me in welcoming her.
Hello, everyone. So as she mentioned, I'm part of Energy Services. So my group, we focus on all of LES's large commercial accounts, and then we also focus on any customer programs regarding solar or energy efficiency or demand reduction, anything like that. So those are kind of all things that I'm going to be touching on tonight. Going into our sustainable energy program to start off with. So our sustainable energy program is focused on helping LES manage our peak demand, as well as promoting energy efficiency, which results in energy savings. So for our sustainable energy program, we do offer incentives for commercial customers making energy efficient improvements. So on the residential side, if you were improving your insulation, if you were installing a high efficiency heat pump or air conditioner, or even a heat pump water heater, those are things that would qualify for an incentive from us. We also have additional incentives on the commercial side. So if a business comes to us and says, hey, I want to install a variable frequency drive, or I want to install an energy management system, or even just adding motion sensors to lights, those are all things that LES would potentially provide incentives for. We also have our custom bucket where our large commercial customers can come and say to us, hey, we heard about this really cool technology. Would you guys provide an incentive for it? So LES does have that custom bucket where we'll evaluate the technology and determine if we would provide an incentive. Going into our ceiling and insulation incentives, so the thing to keep in mind is we do have both attic and wall insulation incentives. Typically for the attic insulation incentive, your home does have to have 6 inches or less of insulation to qualify for that incentive. So an easy way to tell is if you just peek your head up into the attic, if you guys can see like the pillars or the rafters for your ceiling in between the insulation, typically you would qualify for our incentive. Another easy rule of thumb is if your house was built before the 1980s, typically your house would have 6 inches or less of insulation. And then on the wall insulation side, to be eligible for that incentive, your home has to basically have no current wall insulation incentive or wall insulation. And typically an easy rule of thumb with that is if your home was built before the 1950s. But those incentives are 50 cents per square feet of qualifying attic space or 80 cents per square foot of exterior frame wall space. And the last thing to note is with our incentive, you can also stack a tax credit of up to $1,200. The thing I do want to mention about the tax credits is with the Trump administration, these tax credits are potentially going to be going away. We haven't received official word on that, but on some of the grant funding that Nebraska was supposed to receive, he did put a freeze on that. So there is the potential with the tax credits as well that I'm going to mention today. Going into additional requirements for ceiling and insulation, we do require as part of our program that pre and post blower door tests are conducted. So if you're working with one of our trade allies, they have that blower door and they can perform that test for you. And we do require that before and after. And you might ask, why do we require that test? It's going to measure the air tightness of your home. There is a such thing as a home becoming too tight. So making sure that that test is done helps ensure that not only improvements were made, but that, that your house is in fact not too tight for your safety. Going into why is ceiling and insulation important. So improving your building envelope is honestly one of the best things that you can do. It's not only going to ensure a more consistent comfort or consistent temperature or comfort, but it's going to improve your indoor air quality and it's going to result in energy savings or cost savings. Typically what we say is if you're improving your insulation, you're going to stand to save about 20% on your heating and cooling costs. So that's just kind of a general rule of thumb, but it will vary on a case-by-case basis. Going into high efficiency heat pumps and air conditioners. So we have 2 different incentives. So $800 for an air source heat pump. We also provide incentives for mini split heat pumps, which is the same $800. Something to note there is that there are currently tax credits available for 30% up to $2,000 for air source heat pumps, and then air conditioners is a slightly lesser incentive of $600. And that tax credit is a little bit lower at 30% up to $600. Something to note regarding our program, so we do have what we call our energy efficiency requirements. So just like when you're, selecting which furnace to go with, LES does have minimum efficiencies that we require. So the thing to look at there is what we call SEER2. So we do require a minimum SEER2 of 15.2 and a minimum EER2 of 12. Something to keep in mind when looking at those ratings, a higher number means that it's more efficient. So, if you have a 16 SEER2 system versus an 18 SEER2 system, the one with the 18 SEER2 is going to be more efficient. So just something to keep in mind there. The other thing that our program is doing a little bit differently this year is that we are automatically letting inverter-driven equipment qualify. You might ask, what is an inverter-driven piece of equipment? So basically, those pieces of equipment have the ability to adjust the compressors to match your heating and cooling needs. So a traditional system is only going to operate at full load, but those inverter-driven systems do have the ability to adjust their speed, which results in additional energy savings. Going into the city air source heat pump, so you heard that she had mentioned that there were heat pump incentives offered by City of Lincoln. So currently, what's available is a $3,000 incentive. It is specifically meant for low and moderate income residents in Lincoln. So that's a table to the right that, tells you what they would potentially consider low to moderate income. You do have to be below 80% of the Lincoln median area income for that size of household. And I apologize, that's a little bit small, but this can also be found on the website. And this incentive of $3,000 can be stacked with our LES incentive for a total of $3,800. Something else to keep in mind is that this is only available for single-family detached homes, or if you actually live in the unit, a row home, townhome, condo, or duplex would also qualify. But if it's like an apartment in a big multifamily dwelling, that would not qualify for the city incentive. The other thing to keep in mind is that they are requiring that the existing system is replacing something that is at least 5 years old. And to apply for the city incentive specifically, you do need to reach out to that urban development at lincoln.ne.gov to apply for that incentive. And they would give you more instructions on what that application process looks like. Go ahead.
On the chart, so the household of one, just read that one.
Yeah, yep, single household of one. So 80% is 53,700. So you would essentially have to have an income less than 53,700 to qualify for the city incentive.
Please repeat the question, so online people can hear. What was her question?
Oh, her question was, what is the qualifying income for a size household of one? Any other questions regarding this one? Okay. Going into just a quick overview of air source heat pumps. So heat pumps, don't let the name fool you that they do provide both cooling and heating. Heat pumps actually work just like an air conditioner in the summer months. And something that's kind of interesting to keep in mind is if an air conditioner and a heat pump have both the same ER2/SEER2 ratings, so that's the efficiency ratings as a reminder, those would actually operate at the same efficiency in the summer months. And then just to keep in mind when evaluating a system, ER2/SEER2 that is higher is better. Where they differ is heating. Heat pumps can basically operate in reverse during the winter months, so they have a reversing valve, which essentially allows them to transfer heat from the outside air into your home. And because they're transferring heat rather than generating heat, typically they're 2 to 4 times more efficient than a gas or electric furnace. In terms of cost savings, they are most cost effective when you have a current air conditioner and electric furnace and you choose to install a heat pump. So sometimes something to keep in mind that we like to be transparent about is more efficient doesn't always mean the most cost effective. So depending on what your gas prices are, it still might be more cost effective to heat your home with a gas furnace. So just something to keep in mind there. But if you ever want, a cost analysis done by LES, we're more than happy to do that. The other thing to keep in mind is on the heat pump side, if you're looking to see how efficiently it is heating your home, HSPF 2 rating is what's going to tell you how efficiently it is heating your home, and so higher is better for that as well. Going into geothermal heat pumps, so this is obviously more so leveraging ground heat to heat and cool your home. The LES incentive is typically $550 to $1,500 depending on the system efficiency. So again, if you're installing a higher efficiency system, you're going to qualify for a larger incentive from LES. And something to keep in mind regarding geothermal heat pumps specifically, that tax credit is 30% of project cost, and there's not a cap on that. So that contribution can be pretty significant. Going into heat pump water heaters, so LES has an incentive of $500. There's also a tax credit of 30% up to $2,000. Heat pump water heaters are honestly a really good way for you to save energy. They are 3 to 4 times more efficient than a conventional electric water heater. So if you're looking at systems and you want to determine what's the efficiency of this unit, you want to try and look for the UEF. So the UEF is gonna tell you how efficient that system is. Typically, a conventional water heater will be around 0.9, whereas a heat pump water heater would be, 3.88 or 3.5. It's usually well above 3. And as a result of that being more efficient, typically we're seeing households save around $150 per year compared to a conventional electric water heater. The one thing I do want to note regarding heat pump water heaters is you do typically have to have around 1,000 cubic feet of surrounding air for them to maintain their efficiency. The reason being is a heat pump water heater is pulling heat from the air to heat your water. So you need to make sure that there's enough airflow to maintain that efficiency. Maybe? Oh, there it goes. Okay, so for our sustainable energy program recap, again, we provide incentives for heat pump water heaters, high efficiency heat pumps, high efficiency air conditioners if you're upgrading your ceiling and insulation. For more information on any of our incentives, that les.com/SEP is a good website to visit. I didn't talk too much about our commercial incentives, but if you guys have a business and that's something you're interested in, we do have additional information on our commercial incentives on that website. And then for how do I apply? So for our residential incentives, we do have a list of participating contractors on our website. So if you select using one of our participating contractors, they actually will apply for the LES incentive on your behalf. But if for some reason you're choosing to do like a self-install or you're choosing to use a HVAC contractor that's not on our list, you can message us at that scp@les.com email, and we can give you instructions on applying for that. Something to note though regarding that is some of our programs we do require pre-approval. So if you are choosing to forego using one of our trade allies, I do recommend that you reach out to us beforehand so we can make sure all of our requirements are met. Going into our Peak Rewards program, so this is our Smart Thermostat program. We do provide a $25 sign-up incentive, and then we also provide an incentive of a $25 annual bill credit. Households leveraging smart thermostats can really reduce their energy usage, so that's one benefit. And then you're also helping LES manage our peak demand. So as things continue to electrify, capacity is more of a concern now than ever. And so Peak Rewards offers LES a quick and easy way for us to help manage that peak demand. And basically what that consists of is LES would make small adjustments, no more than 3 degrees, to your thermostat less than 15 times a year. And typically those adjustments don't last for more than 2 to 3 hours. So our impact is we try to make it pretty minimal, but it does, again, help LES manage our peak demand. And if this is a program that you're interested in signing up for, that LES peakrewards.com program is a good site to visit for more information. And just on the right there is a picture, and it's kind of hard to see, I apologize, but the green shows the dip kind of right there. And that's just displaying the impact that did have on LES's peak demand. And then these are just a couple of different thermostat brands that could potentially qualify. And these can also be found on our website. Going into solar, so we do have multiple options available for solar. The first one being obviously just installing it on your home. We also have our community solar where you can essentially buy a virtual solar panel. And then we'll also talk about sun shares and our renewable energy certificates. So installing solar on your home or business, what do you need to know? So before you go about deciding that you want to install solar, the first thing you need to do is conduct a property assessment. So does solar make sense for your house? Something to keep in mind is typically we recommend not placing solar on an older roof. So you do want to make sure that your roof is fairly new, just because solar panels do have a fairly long lifespan. The other thing that we ask you to consider is do you have a bunch of trees around your home? Is there light that's going to be filtered as a result of the trees? So that can have an impact on your system output. We also recommend, looking at, does my house have the ability to, have south-facing solar panels? If you're doing east or west, you're going to see output reduced by 20 to 30% as compared to if it was south. So just, again, something to keep in mind there as well. The other thing that we ask our customers to consider is considering the long-term financial impact. So, some solar businesses will say, if you install solar, you're not going to have an LES bill. LES does have monthly fixed costs that we charge you. So no matter what, no matter how much you reduce your energy, you're always going to have that fixed cost. And that will consist of both your facilities charge, your customer charge, taxes, those sorts of things. And we did list what our facilities charges typically are. The one thing to note is that solar can help decrease your facilities charge, but that's not guaranteed. So perhaps if you install solar, you might go from a level 2 to a level 1, and you would save about $15 a month on your utility bill if that were the case. But the most cost savings you're going to see from solar is really the offset that you have from the amount of energy you need to purchase from LES. So 1 kW of solar should produce around 1,500 kWh annually. So what that means is, let's take an average residential size of 7.16 kW. That's on average is going to reduce your bill $600 to $700 a year. But we do recommend that that's just kind of a general number, and to kind of determine that exact output that you would potentially have for energy and cost savings, to either reach out to us at our energyservices@les.com email, or there's also a tool, it's called PV Watts, and you can just type it into Google, and it can tell you, this is based on whatever inputs you specify for your house, this is how much potential output we expect for your system. And then going into incentives for solar and tax credits. So there is a tax credit for 30% of the cost. And then LES does have an incentive for solar. We call it our capacity payment. So that's going to either be $375 per kW south facing or $475 per kW west facing. The one thing to note regarding that payment, though, is that in order to be eligible for that, LES does require that you use one of our trade allies. So that would be something that you would want to go to our website and make sure that you're using one of our trade allies. This is just a payback example of solar. So typically with solar, we're seeing a payback average of 15 to 20 years. This payback example is specifically taking into account the tax credit, the incentive from LES. It's taking into account the annual bill savings that you would experience, all of those things. But this one specifically comes out to about 16.74 years. But again, on average, it's about 15 to 20 years in the Lincoln area. Other solar options. So solar, again, might not make sense for everybody. So our SunShares program is $3 minimum per month. So you could essentially call into LES and sign up for our SunShares program, and that's just basically a way for customers to support LES's solar research. So that's one small way to contribute to solar. And then the second would be a lot of our customers, especially in like apartment buildings, they might purchase what we call our virtual net metering. And again, I apologize that that's kind of small, but it is $255 per half panel or $510 per full panel. And the expected savings is between $15 and $30 per year. And this is just a picture of what our solar farm looks like, where you would, where your panel that you're purchasing would essentially be housed. So it's north of I-80. Going into our renewable energy certificates, so kind of the last thing that LES has is we have what we call our renewable energy certificates, and it's basically the price per kW is 0.002 cents per kWh, and it's basically just a way for you to say my energy that I consumed over the past year was supplied by renewable energy. And so in this example, this customer that signed up, their annual usage was 16,602 kWh. And so because they signed up for our renewable energy certificates, they were able to support renewable energy, and essentially it costed them $34.20. So pretty minimal in cost to be able to say all of my energy was sourced by renewable energy. And then for questions on any of our programs, the top one is specifically meant for energy efficiency. So if you have questions about heat pumps or insulation, that contact sep@les.com. That's actually a joint inbox that'll go to anyone on our team. And then that visit les.com/SEP, that'll include all of our terms and conditions, our contractors list, etc. But then if you have any questions on solar, that energy services at les.com email is a good one to reference, or visit that les.com/solar is also a good one. But if you guys have any particular questions, I'm more than happy to answer any today.
Yes, this is in regard to the solar system that you would have individually owned. Does LES buy any of the power back if there's excess power?
Yes, yep.
And what rate is that compared to the rate that they charge in the first place?
So summer months we charge 7 cents per kWh, and in the winter months we charge 5 cents per kWh. And basically for what we buy it back at is half of that cost. So during the summer it would be 3.5 cents, and during the winter it would be 2.5. But it's essentially what we purchase the power back for whatever we would purchase it from somewhere else. So.
About the vendors that do insulation and sealing, is that usually just a single company that does both, and how do you contact them to sort of get a bid and the paperwork that LES requires for that?
Yep. So we do have a list on our website, so that les.com/SEP. But you can also, if you just email that SEP@les.com, I'm more than happy to send you that contractors list. For sealing and insulation specifically, we have, I want to say 8 contractors that are pretty active in our program. And from there it would be, LES can't typically recommend one over another, but we do recommend that you get a couple different quotes so that you can get the best pricing. But then from there, they would apply for everything on behalf of you to LES. Do you have additional questions regarding that?
It's percolating in my head.
Okay.
Not ready yet.
Okay, so tell us, when we talk about sealing, what do they actually do when they do attic sealing?
That would be, so part of the blower door test, for example, one of the good things about doing that is you're not just, packing in insulation, you're identifying the leaks. And so they're identifying those areas where there's a lot of airflow, and whether that's caulking or giving additional insulation or anything like that, that's kind of what they're doing for sealing, but fixing the leaks.
Okay, I had my attic sealed before this LES SEP program existed. And they sealed around my ceiling fans.
Yep.
They sealed all of my electrical drops.
Yep.
You know, so you've got an electrical drop with this little tiny wire that comes down to your outlet, but it's at least an inch. So there's air that passes through
Yep.
all the time. I also had some recessed lighting
Yep.
that was open to the attic. So I replaced those receptacles myself.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
just, you know, I just asking the question so people know what actually attic sealing does. And then the insulation on the top.
Yep.
Do you know what the code is, Jessica? Current code in Lincoln
For,
for R value in your attic?
current code,
Is it R48 or is it R38?
I think it's R38.
Okay, I'm not sure. We're considered a cold climate here in Lincoln, and so some contractors will tell you, you know, R48 or R60, and they're not lying. I mean, that's valid.
Mhm. Absolutely. And just something to keep in mind also in terms of, since we're talking ceiling, there can be a lot of like air penetration around like a light switch. So if you have a light switch on like an exterior wall, they do make kits that you could buy at like a Lowe's, that basically it comes with like a thin plate of foam that you can place between the wall cavity and the plate that you visibly see, and that helps reduce air leakage around those. Yeah. Yep. R49 is it? Okay.
If you've had, I had the door, whatever you call that, blower thing, they did that to my house, and I had insulation blown into my walls and stuff, but that was years ago.
Yeah.
So would that still be an okay thing, or would they have to do that all over again?
In terms of, so.
It was like 10 or more years ago that I had that.
So typically, are you asking specifically for wall insulation? Or,
The insulation and the, well, they did both they did the wall insulation, but they also did the test with covered the doors and whatever that is.
Yep. So for our incentive program, technically to be eligible for our incentives, they would have to redo the blower door tests. But in terms of if you're just asking about insulation in general, you know, once you have wall insulation, there's diminishing returns on like energy savings. So if you already have wall insulation, you're probably okay on that, but it's not bad to, you know, go and look and see, you know, what does my existing attic insulation look like, and potentially look at, you know, increasing it.
We're speaking about the blower test, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that LES supports financially? Or do we have to work with a contractor to have that done and pay out of the pocket?
So typically what happens is the contractors that we work with will do the blower door test for you. And LES doesn't directly pay for the blower door test, but our incentives are higher than what you would see for like OPPD or NPPD. And so the higher incentive that we offer kind of helps offset that blower door test cost.
Can you install insulation and do the ceiling now in this kind of weather? And similarly, can you install a heat pump now?
Yes, to both of those questions. Some contractors with heat pumps like to better protect the equipment. They will wait until it's, you know, not the coldest day of the year. But yes, contractors are still actively installing heat pumps. And on the insulation side, I don't believe that there's a reason why they wouldn't be able to do the installation right now. For installation, I'm not 100% sure on if there would be things that the contractor, wouldn't want to do, but for the most part, we still have our contractors year-round applying.
Not be as busy this time of year?
Our HVAC contractors are extremely busy this time of year, just because there's a lot of different furnaces going out, for example, and so, people don't want their pipes to freeze. Insulation, it's probably a little bit slower this time of year, but both programs are still active throughout the year, so I would assume that you could install either at any time of year.
I'm just going to add that every time I've had insulation put in my attic, all the contractors that I ever got a bid from would rather work this time of the year than when it's 100 degrees outside and they've got to get in the attic. It's beastly. It's just beastly in the attic in the summertime.
Yep.
If you don't have a heat pump, do you have to install those pipes, that underneath, like in the backyard or something? In the picture you showed earlier with a house. Geothermal.
So, this picture, let's see.
Yeah,
So this one is specifically a geothermal heat pump. So most heat pumps that are installed in residential are air source. So this one specifically is using a water loop where it's circulating and storing water in the ground. But if you're, I don't have a picture of an air source, but air source looks pretty much very similar to an air conditioner, except it would most likely have a pedestal so that air can come up below. But it looks very, very similar to an air conditioner.
Yeah, insulation is, in the walls is one heat loss area, but windows are also a main heat loss area. Are there any incentives to put in more thermally efficient windows?
Our program specifically does not offer window incentives. Unfortunately, there is obviously some benefits to improving heat loss, but there's not as much energy savings as when you're improving your insulation. So unfortunately, that's something that we don't provide an incentive for.
You mentioned the federal incentives. Are you monitoring what's happening on the federal level? And
Yep.
You mentioned something that came down today related to, what was the thing? What did you refer to that
So,
happened today?
so LES, or I guess Nebraska, for those of you that don't know, was awarded over $100 million in federal dollars for agricultural energy efficiency and solar for all, et cetera. And so those funds specifically have been put on hold for 90 days while the new administration is evaluating those initiatives. In Trump's speech, he had specifically called out the EV tax credit. He didn't specifically discuss tax credits for solar or for heat pumps or any of that stuff, but we're waiting day by day, looking at it every day to, kind of hear what's happening with that. So any of these tax credits that you've seen are potentially, in jeopardy, unfortunately, but hopefully they don't go away. Go ahead.
So now's the time to contact Representative Flood and well, I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
To
Yep.
say, these are important for Nebraska. They provide benefits for Nebraska residents.
Yep.
This $300 million grant that you mentioned, Governor Pillen called it transformational when we were awarded it last summer.
Yep.
So I think we should be talking to our federal representatives and
For
saying
sure.
they're good for our it's good for agriculture, it's good for the state of Nebraska, it will help our economy.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
In your talk, you mentioned that at a certain point, there's a trade-off where, say, an air conditioner would be a better investment than a heat pump. And could you repeat that again, or?
Yep,
Thank
so, I'll just go, probably referring to this slide right here. So air conditioners and heat pumps, they work the exact same in the summer months. And it's not necessarily that an air conditioner is better. And a heat pump in the winter months, it will heat your home more efficiently than a furnace. But where a heat pump might not make sense if you're looking at it from a costing perspective is sometimes your gas prices might be a lot cheaper than what the electric rate is. And so even though it's more efficient than a gas furnace, it might not be the cheapest if you're considering both your gas and your electric bill. Where a heat pump makes 100% sense is if you have electric heat with an air conditioner currently, and you are going to a heat pump, you're gonna save 3 times the amount of energy on the heating side, because an electric furnace is only 100% efficient as opposed to a heat pump, which is 300 to 400% efficient.
Do you have any input about for how many years a system like this will last?
For a heat pump?
For the system, heat pump and air conditioner?
Yep, so a heat pump is typically gonna last around 15 years. Air conditioners, very, very similar. It's a little bit higher than a heat pump. The reason being a heat pump is gonna be running all year round. So because a heat pump is running more often than an air conditioner, the air conditioner is gonna last a little bit longer. But still kind of in that same 15 to 20 year ballpark.
My experience with heat pumps is that they're not efficient enough in the winter when it gets below zero to actually heat the home. So therefore, you have to have some sort of an auxiliary backup heat system.
That is correct, yep. For the most part, heat pumps will heat your home until about, shut-off temperature depends upon the particular system. Typically, it'll heat your home until about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And then if you have, let's say, a gas furnace as your backup, the heat pump would shut off and then your gas furnace would kick in. There are what they're calling cold climate heat pumps that can maintain their efficiency down to, I believe it's -5 degrees Fahrenheit now. That's not all heat pumps, that's specifically cold climate ones. But they will still more efficiently heat your home in between that, 20 plus Fahrenheit range than like a typical furnace. But you would still always need a backup furnace, whether it be electric or gas.
So does the backup furnace come with a heat pump, is that, or do you have to, would a backup furnace come with a heat pump, or is that separately, you have to put that together as a package?
So there's kind of 2 answers to that. A lot of times when people are installing a heat pump, they're installing a furnace at the same time. So usually the contractor will just kind of put it all together in a quote for you. Some of our customers do try to use their existing furnace, and they can do that, but it is technically a separate unit.
I used to live in Omaha, and at that time I had an electric heat pump, and there was an electric unit that would come on when it got down below 20 degrees.
Yep.
Yeah, and so it was part of the furnace system. I mean, it's part of,
Yep.
it was all built in, but it would just automatically switch over to that when it got
Yep.
below a certain temperature. So yeah, it happens. It's not something you need to worry about.
Yeah.
I have geothermal, which is the ground source heating and cooling. And I have, like Ken was saying, I have the electrical backup, I put my system in 2009, the first year that LES had the SEP program. My electric backup has never run,
Really?
never.
Wow.
Yes, it's working, Larry.
I was gonna say, are your pipes frozen?
There's always somebody in the crowd.
Yeah.
With geothermal, that would make sense.
Yes.
It's the same heat from the same source.
I was gonna say, my dad has geothermal, and he's achieving like I believe it's a 23 SEER2, where like an air source heat pump on average we're seeing in a SEER2 of like probably 15 or 16. So quite a bit difference between an air source heat pump and geothermal.
If you're putting in a geothermal and you're digging up your yard to do all this, and it's only going to last 15 years?
So on the geothermal heat pump side, so there's kind of two different components. Let's see. So there's the wells, and then there's the actual heat pump portion of it. So the like physical outdoor unit and condenser, et cetera, that's probably what's gonna last 15 years. The wells will last longer. So it doesn't mean in 15 years you're gonna be
I was going to say 15 years doesn't sound like very long.
Correct. So the wells are gonna last probably double that, if not triple that. But, so like, let's say you have geothermal and you're doing a replacement, you're not gonna have to replace all of these wells in 15 years. You would just replace the actual, like outdoor unit portion, outdoor and indoor unit portion of it.
So my wells that were installed in 2009 are guaranteed for 50 years,
Yeah.
50.
Yep.
And I'm not going to be living in the house,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
seriously. And my box was put in 2009, and so it's 16 years old, and it's still hustling right along.
Yep.
And there's nothing outside when you have geothermal. Your wells are buried. You don't have a box sitting outside like you do with a typical gas furnace and an air conditioner. My whole contraption that runs everything from my geothermal sits in my basement and hooks up to my wells, those little loops shown there in the picture.
Yep.
And LPS, Lincoln Public Schools, has redone all of their buildings to use geothermal heating and cooling, and all new schools, grade schools, middle schools, high schools, are built with geothermal heating and cooling because of their durability.
Yep.
And that saves money for us as taxpayers. I mean, we should be thankful,
Yep.
absolutely
And,
thankful.
LPS has qualified for most, if not all, of their systems for water source heat pumps or geothermal have qualified under our sustainable energy program. So they're a big user of our program.
I was just going to make a comment about Lincoln Public Schools. This was several years ago, but I was told a while back that they saved $7 million a year on energy costs because of the geothermal heat pumps. And they also, the capital, our state capital has switched to geothermal recently. There's a well field over in I think it's still a vacant lot, but they're probably going to build an apartment or something, building over that at some
Yep.
point. But it's all geothermal now, and they're going to save a bunch of money in the long run.
And the capital also leverages the District Energy Corporation as well for part of their energy, which is also typically, I think, 10 to 20% more efficient than conventional. So
You've mentioned participating contractors. You also mentioned trade allies. And are they the same, number one?
yep. they
And are these people, are these companies ones who have to qualify for that distinction? I assume they do. And then since they qualify, do they do a good job? You must feel they do a good job because you're really recommending them in a sense. And is there a place where I can find out whether my regular HVAC company that I've gone to for years is a participating contractor or trade ally.
Yes, so yes, I apologize, I use those terms
That's okay.
interchangeably.
Yeah.
So trade ally and participating contractor are the same thing. In terms of what we determine for, can they qualify for participating in our program, we disclose that in our terms and conditions. We don't technically endorse any contractors, but what they do have to go through is an annual orientation with us to make sure that they're, accurately representing the program. We also do complete what I would say random spot checks, those sorts of things. And so we don't technically, they're our partners, but we don't technically, endorse them. But if you're, wanting to find out, is your typical HVAC contractor on our list? Again, we have that list available on that website, which is, it's that les.com/SEP. But can I ask, who is your contractor?
Bigger staff?
Yes, they are. Yep, absolutely. But that les.com/SEP always keeps an updated list. But bigger staff is on our list, so.
Jessica, could you talk specifically about the solar panel farm that LES has? That's a nice picture. You can see it from the interstate there.
Yeah.
But, sometimes people say, well, I live in an apartment, so I can't put up my own solar panels, but I sure would like to have some.
Yep.
So if I live in an apartment, I can still invest, as long as I get an LES bill.
Yep.
I can invest in a panel that I get what the sun generates from.
Yep.
Could you talk about that a little bit, please?
Yep. So what she's referring to is, again, this solar farm. And basically, we call it our community solar. We also call it our virtual net metering. So if that was something that you guys were interested in, whether you live in an apartment or you determine that it doesn't make sense for your house, you could actually purchase what we call our virtual panels, which would be one of those solar panels, but it's $510 per panel. And essentially what happens is we place a bill credit on your LES bill for essentially the energy that your panel generates. And that estimated savings is $30 per panel, or $30 per panel per year.
And I could buy half a panel too.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
And also this church, or any business,
Yep.
could use solar this way instead of, so I don't have solar at home because I'm invested in this program.
Yep.
Because I don't have to do maintenance, I don't have to worry about a hailstorm, bird poop, nothing. I mean, seriously.
It's also a really good way to get into solar and support solar without the large upfront investment of, installing solar yourself.
I assume there's not really ownership in the panel or the individual panel.
Correct. So LES will maintain, but our program, what we do is we basically have a tracking system. So we say, we have this many, it's 15,033 panels. So we know that we can sell 15,033 panels. And yes, you don't have one that technically says this is Jerry's panel, but we do reserve we basically kind of have like a virtual reserve to ensure that we're not overselling. But if you're purchasing one panel, theoretically, one of these panels would be representative of.
Okay, because they can wear out after so many years, you haven't really lost an investment. It's not your asset to lose.
Correct, yep. And we would retire it at that point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, if I'm completely lost, and I'm like, well, I'm not sure who to trust. I've had ABC, XYZ come out before. Are they really, reputable? But it's cold weather. Furnace isn't working so well. Can I call you guys?
Absolutely, yep. LES, whether you want us to come do basically like a walkthrough energy audit with you guys, that's always something that we're more than willing to do. There's just a general phone number on our website that you can call. You can also either reach out to either of those emails and it'll go to either myself or somebody on our team. And we can either, review the quote that the contractor gave you. We can do an energy audit to say, these are the things that we think that you could do to save energy in your home. Anything like that, we're more than happy to review. And like in particular, like for solar, if you want us to do like a cost analysis, anything like that, we're more than happy to do that. But either just give us a call or reach out to one of those emails.
And if I talk with you, if I'm a lost soul and I talk with you, and if I would qualify for the city incentive, if my system's on its last legs and I would qualify, would that be something that somebody in your group would bring up to me?
Theoretically, yes, we should. So kind of going on the city incentives, let's see. So the city incentives, kind of the unfortunate thing is there were two different incentive pools. There was general pop and then there was low to moderate income. We actually just expended all of the general population funds a couple weeks ago. So the LMI is the only incentive that the city currently has available. But typically if you're, looking for information or who to contact, regarding the city incentive for the 3,000, whoever you're talking with via email or phone should be bringing up that incentive and should be able to answer your questions. But ultimately, that approval for the low to moderate income incentive will happen by the city of Lincoln. And that would be that urban development at lincoln.ne.gov that you would need to apply with.
So I'm just going to mention, when I did my geothermal system in 2009, the paperwork and all so forth was entirely different. Now, this last summer, I put in a heat pump hot water heater. And basically, from my standpoint as a consumer, the contractor I worked with did all the paperwork. They calculated the LES incentive. I guess I had to calculate what my federal tax credit was and things like that, but it's streamlined. So don't worry about getting out your calculator, is what I'm trying to say. The contractor that you work with will discuss that with you. You'll be able to see it right on any bid or any contract you might sign and so forth. It'll be disclosed right on there.
Absolutely.
Any questions, Nancy, from online? No. Any other questions for tonight?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to give a plug for I find your website very easy to use. It's very easy to follow. And I guess one other comment, it's my understanding that the contractors, as part of the being listed as a trade ally, they're required to tell people about the incentives that Carrie just mentioned.
Yes.
So
yep.
that's part of the deal. They're supposed to say, okay, you're eligible for X and Y.
Yep.
So.
Most of our contractors, they'll give you kind of like two options where they'll say, this is what you could install as a base efficiency. This is what would be considered the high efficiency, and this qualifies for the LES incentive. Most of them will do that. Not all, but most.
Anything else for the cause tonight? just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, everybody online who's been viewing. Great questions. I wanted to also say, and of course, thanks to Jessica. Couldn't do it without her. Our next presentation in this series will be February 25th, and we will be hearing from, excuse me, a woman from the city of Lincoln on their climate action plan. Now, that's not a small thing, but she's going to be talking about things that are going on right now that we can see, touch, feel, hear, whatever. But read it in your spare time. You can find it on the City of Lincoln website. And Ken's chuckling over that. But good things are happening in Lincoln, and we invite you to come back on February 25th. That's Tuesday evening also. And thank you again for coming, and we bid you a wonderful evening.